no gutwaraga na hinya twe motitore tutiagethika ni undu wa kuruira bũrũri witũ.
From the torture that happened to the dispossession, the British have pretty much gotten away with it.
It's not only targeting Kenya, it is targeting the entire Africa. They talk about Dr. Kwame Nkrumah. They talk about Belgian Congo.
Was there truly a transition between colonial and post-colonial Kenya? There's a very thin line.
The British are the backbones of the sex work business.
He forced himself on me.
This was a British soldier?
Yes.
But we haven't tried to cover up anything. We've assisted all the way through.
I feel like we are still under slavery in a different way, in a capitalistic way.
This is classical imperialism. This is classical neocolonialism.
"60 years ago, a black Kenyan like me couldn't walk through this library. It was for whites only. Britain colonized my country and used it as a playground for labor and exploitation. This year we celebrate 6 decades of independence. But how much has really changed? We've not only uncovered the hidden history of British colonialism in Kenya, but found that its legacy of exploitation and violence lives on today." Britain colonized what is now Kenya in 1895, first as the East Africa Protectorate and in 1920 as a British Crown colony. By the 1950s, white settlers had stolen almost 7.5 million acres of land. Kenyan communities had resisted colonialism from the beginning, culminating in the 1950s Mau Mau revolt, a guerrilla army that was fighting back. Muthoni Wakirima was the only female field marshal leading a unit of Mau Mau men in resistance against colonial powers.
No gutwaraga na hinya niakeigirie ni undu wa kumeherera nigetha ni undu wa kuruira bũrũri witũ ni undu mundu uria waranaga guku ni Mũngeretha tutiakendire kuruta Mũngeretha guku ndaumaga gĩthaka ngacingĩra mũrũngu ũcio ũkorwo Nairobi ũgĩthiĩ kwanyu mere ũguo.
After a brutal war against the Mau Mau to try and avert independence, the British were forced to go back home in 1963. They left, but not from everywhere. In fact, the UK military presence in Kenya is still its biggest in Africa. After independence, the British maintained a military base here in Nanyuki, Laikipia called Batuk, and they've never left. Every year, 3,000 British troops train here. Now they say they're contributing to the economy of the country, but what lies in the shadows of this tale is a story of abuse of power. With allegations of rape, murder, and violence, the chilling echoes of British colonialism still ring true today.
Ni Agnes.
Hapa alikuwa na miaka ngapi?
6 ama 7. Na hapa ni yeye wakiwa shule. Ni sasa ni mtoto wake ni Stacy akiwa mdogo, akiwa mwaka na miezi. Tulikuwa tumeenda kwa hiyo nini ya mama yake kuwekelea maua kwa kaburi. Niko juu kabisa, si hapa karibu. Tukukuwa na mahali ya nini, tukukuwa na shamba. Sasa ilibidi nimwambie kila kitu, nimwambie venye kulienda. Mama yake walienda matembezi na marafiki wake kwenye walienda kufurahia sherehe zao, akakutana na mzungu. Kukutana na mzungu hakupatikana tena. Tukakaa kama miezi 2 ama 3 ndio akapatikana akiwa ameuawa. Sasa ananiulizaga kwa nini huyo mzungu aliua mama yake kwa nini?
Agnes Wanjiru was murdered by a British soldier in March 2012. She was just 21 years old with a 5-month-old daughter. Her body was found decomposed in a septic tank 2 months later. She'd been stabbed in the stomach, had a blow to her chest, and may have been alive when she was drowned. Her family say that the British Army is protecting the soldier and covering up the murder.
Tuseme pande zote ya huku kwetu na ya huko ni kama wataki hii mambo, sababu hata huku kwetu hakuna vyenye tunajua na huko hakuna vyenye tunajua. Ni kama wote wamekaa kama wamefisha.
He took me to the tank and lifted it up, and I looked in, and I just remember seeing her in there. I went back to camp, grassed him up. I got called a liar, but when we got back, I told everyone. I got told to keep my mouth shut.
Despite soldiers who were there speaking to the British press, despite the Kenyan inquest into her death naming the suspects, and despite those being involved making fun of the murder online, no British soldier has been questioned or arrested over the killing. We asked Major Adrian Wheel, media representative at Batok, for his response to Rose's claim of a cover-up.
But we haven't tried to cover up anything. We've assisted all the way through. There is cooperation taking place between the UK police authorities and the Kenyan police service. That's happening at a much higher level than where I work. It's a matter between governments. Batok is not a detective agency. We can't investigate the case, but we will offer every assistance to those who are investigating the case that we possibly can.
Soldiers in Nanyuki have a bad reputation, and it's not just the most serious allegations of murder. In 2012, 200 of them were involved in a drunken bar brawl, where one was even thrown out of a window. Since then, we're told they've cleaned up their act. But it only took us a few days to see soldiers drunk, loud and aggressive, and even threatening violence. Then and now, murder, violence, and rape have been a part of Britain's presence in Kenya. During colonialism, it was systemic and widespread, especially as the British tried to crush the Mau Mau and target its leadership, like Dedan Kimathi, who was the movement's charismatic, revolutionary leader. Feared by the British, who ultimately captured and killed him, and have refused to reveal where they buried him, even today.
No nä å horo ndamũtwarä ra nake akagä na å gä nä å ndamå he å rä a wothe kå rathiä å rä a kå rerwo må ndå mwerå no må ndå å rä hinya no ndå kä å twarä andå aingä rä u arä o kambä o ä mwe na kambä ciake rä nyingä tå hå rä te gä thaka.
Dedan Kimathi was a hero of this continent, not just Kenya. And by being my uncle, maternal uncle, I still value him as my hero. Dedan Kimathi wanted the proper human rights. He did not want people to grab the land of the central Kenya people. He also wanted people to be free.
He occupies such a big place in the history of Kenya.
We cannot run away from it. It has been suppressed, but it has been evolving every day, every day.
Why was he such a threat to the British government? One man.
I am told by my father, he was very eloquent. He would meet the Mau Maus in the forests. This is a man here who wants to stop colonialism. And he's putting people together, giving them oath, and telling them we must be able to protect our land. We should not let this land go to a white man.
Absolutely.
And telling people you must be able to remove this chain of being colonized. You are equal to the task. You can also be your own rulers.
The British were so scared of Kimathi's power and influence, they had a bounty on his head. On the 21st of October 1956, Ian Henderson, a colonial police officer who'd been on an obsessive hunt for Kimathi, shot him and captured him.
The people in the neighboring section thought that there was a buffalo being shot because the sound of the gun. Only to find out that it's Dedan Kimathi who's been shot. And this is according to my aunties who live near there. And when they realized Dedan Kimathi who was shot, they all got shocked. And my auntie tells me Kimathi had a watch here. And so when he was lifted up, he could raise up his hand and say, "Hi, how are you? Take care of the land." Before
Even
he was,
on the stretcher?
yes, he was still able to speak with his deadlock and what have you. And then when he was put near the chief's camp, the white man came in a Land Rover. And from that time, Kimathi switched off. He didn't want to say anything in the presence of the white man.
The photo that we see of Kimathi on the stretcher, he looks tired, they have really portrayed him as a weak person in the famous photo that the British took.
They have always tried
exactly.
to. Yes.
But what you have said about his last moments, even in his own village, being moments of encouraging people.
Don't let the land go.
To rise up.
Don't let the land go.
It's a memory that
I can even put it in Kikuyu. Don't let it go. Don't the land go. Don't let the land. You know, you could see a man fighting even on his stretch.
Dedan Kimathi was killed because as a leader, he would have challenged British interests in Kenya. And Britain didn't want that. They wanted a transition to independence that they could manage, manipulate, and control. So after Kimathi's capture, they imprisoned the Mau Mau en masse in concentration camps. At least 90,000 Kenyans were executed, tortured, or maimed, all because they wanted independence. The brutality was heinous, as one soldier starkly put it in an interview with historian Caroline Elkins.
I stayed for a few hours to help the boys out, softening him up. Things got a little out of hand. By the time I cut his balls off, he had no ears and his eyeball was hanging out of his socket. Too bad he died before we got much out of him.
From the torture that happened to the dispossession, the British have pretty much gotten away with it. And it's not just, I think, theft in terms of sort of material, tangible things. You know, it's theft of history. It was theft of documents when they left. You know, till today you've got documents in the UK, you know, that detail the things that were being done here, but they've not been repatriated here. In fact, for pretty much 50 or 60 years, the British government lied about having them.
When the British left Kenya, they covered their tracks. They burnt hundreds of thousands of files and hid thousands of others at Hounslow Park, an intelligence base in England. Until 2012, they denied these files even existed. Now, some have been declassified. We've looked through hundreds of these documents, and what they reveal are shocking. Not just because of the violence they contain, but of the political paranoia they disclose. In this document, they are worried about the questions Mau Mau are asking in their meetings about Pan-African leaders, imperial violence, and communism.
You know, it is instructive that this letter is written to the Director of Intelligence and Security in Nairobi. And is not only targeting Kenya, it is targeting the entire Africa. They talk about Dr. Kwame Nkrumah. They talk about Belgian Congo. They are talking about communism. And it's a paradox and an irony at once that the Mau Mau, whom had been branded savages, are now being feared because they will be communists. Remember that this is the period of the emergence of the Cold War, and the West is now afraid, particularly the British, that if we don't take control of them, then they'll gravitate toward the Soviet Union. This is classical imperialism. This is classical neocolonialism. Grant them political independence, but ensure that you continue to control them, and those within their ranks who are independent-minded, kill them, demonstrate that they cannot survive because they are communists. Tragedy. Tragic.
What the Hounslow disclosure undoubtedly proves is that brutality and torture was sanctioned right from the very top of government in London down to the prison guards here in Kenya. In this letter from September 1952, we see that Europeans in Laikipia are enacting a policy to murder 10 Kikuyu for every European murdered. In this particular letter, 2 women are beaten and raped after they're ordered to collect firewood for a home guard post.